The dollar sign appears for the first time in the 1770s, according to most historians, but no one knows for sure where it came from. There are a few theories about its mysterious origin that possibly predates the United States. What if I told you that the most likely story for the symbol that came to represent American money involves an Irish immigrant writing about Spanish money in New Orleans? This is The Irish in New Orleans and the origin of the dollar sign. According to the Encyclopedia of Word and Phrase Origins, quote, the dollar sign probably doesn't derive from the figure 8 on Spanish pieces of 8, the usual explanation. The dollar sign was most likely modified from the twisted pillars of Hercules stamped with a scroll around them on the pieces of 8. It may, however, result from a combination of the two symbols or a corruption of the Spanish PS, the contraction for peso. Anyway, if George Washington threw a silver dollar across the Potomac or Delaware, it must have been a foreign coin, for, as noted, the American silver dollars weren't minted at the time. Unquote. While New Orleans isn't mentioned in this explanation, that note about a possible origin in the abbreviation for the Spanish peso is our clue. New Orleans was a Spanish colony in the 1770s, using the Spanish peso as currency. Oliver Pollock lived in New Orleans from 1768 through 1781. He was born in 1737 in County Tyrone, Ireland. He first went to Philadelphia before he went to Havana in 1760 and made friends with Alejandro O'Reilly. O'Reilly became governor of Louisiana in 1768. Learn about his takeover of New Orleans in the video linked in the description. In 1770, he married Margaret O'Brien, who was also an Irish immigrant. In the 500 block of Charters, there is a plaque commemorating where he supposedly lived in New Orleans, which is now a parking lot, and has been a parking lot since at least 1962, but it was a wood yard and stables before that since at least 1896. The property records for this lot go back to 1722, so we can see who owned the property at the time Oliver was in New Orleans. Whatever building was here burned in both the 1788 fire and the 1794 fire. It's unclear where this information came from, as his name is not included in the property records of the French Quarter, which was the whole city in 1768 through 1781. In the 1976 article noting the addition of the plaque, the author doubted the veracity of the story that he lived there. No newspaper records from New Orleans during that time remain, and I found no mention of his New Orleans address in other papers. In the 1938 New Orleans City Guide, Pollock is listed as an important figure and a New Orleans merchant, but they moved from the location of the first fire to the pharmacy to the Napoleon House without mention of Oliver Pollock's residence. According to the images in the Vieux Carré digital survey, there was a 2-story building here in the 1930s through the 1950s. In the 1770s, Pollock helped finance the American Revolution. Even though the American Revolution established the United States in 1776, the Louisiana Purchase did not occur until 1803. The story goes that because he was in New Orleans, a Spanish colony, he recorded his transactions in Spanish pesos. Eventually, the PS notation overlaps into the beginning of the dollar sign. According to some historians, this is the first recorded dollar sign on a letter from Pollock to George Roger Clark in 1778. Pollock lost his fortune financing the Revolution and moved to Havana in 1783. He was in New Orleans again after the 1788 fire and in 1790, according to these newspaper records. He owned the Tunica plantation from the 1770s through 1782, which may explain his lack of a New Orleans address, and again from 1789 to 1723 when he died. In 1791, he left Louisiana, according to the National Register of Historic Places registration form for Trudeau House, which was where the Pollock plantation was. In 1819, Pollock moved in with his daughter in Mississippi, where he died and was buried. His grave reads, Oliver Pollock, Louisiana, Aid, Galvez Expedition, Revolutionary War, 1823. Oliver was largely forgotten in the history books, even though he played a substantial role in the American fight for independence, as well as the development of our cultural currency. The truth of the origin of the dollar sign is probably lost to history, but since so many American things originated in New Orleans, I'm comfortable believing that this bit of American culture also spawned in New Orleans. A special thank you to Mark from New Orleans Secrets. I highly recommend this tour company for an informative and entertaining tour. Please like and subscribe for more tours and stories from the deep coming soon.